As we know, COVID-19 has uncovered a much bigger problem in the medical system. One of the more shocking questions has been, why are so many Black and brown moms dying across the country? The answer may surprise you, but first, take a look at this.
I just remember getting up and I couldn't breathe. And I was like, I can't breathe. Like, I couldn't take a deep breath. I started coughing because I couldn't breathe. It hurt so bad. It hurt so bad. And then my stitches broke. And I remember I was in the bathroom with my mom and I was just crying and crying. And she was crying. She's like, you just gotta breathe. And I was like, I can't breathe.
As we continue with our Real Talk, Real Change programming, we turn now to something that has become an urgent crisis for many women in this country: pregnancy. The maternal mortality rate in the U.S. is the highest among developed countries. Women of color are 243% more likely to die from pregnancy or childbirth-related causes. Why is this happening? Experts say the underlying reason is quite simply racism. Bringing a child into the world, it's supposed to be one of the most magical moments in a person's life. But for Black mothers, it can be a devastating nightmare, ending in death.
Black women are the most disrespected, unprotected women, that exist. And that's very true. And no matter how many times we're screaming about our trauma and our experience, it doesn't stick.
Someone who should be experiencing childbirth in its purest form, instead gets trapped in like this crazy healthcare system that doesn't listen to women of color when they talk about discomfort.
And it doesn't matter how much money you make or education you have.
I was so married to my birth plan, but what I did not prepare for was a scenario where everything goes south. Being a professional athlete, I never imagined myself in this situation. There are so many women who do not walk out of the hospital. They are not there to raise their children.
It's like a daily grind to get people to think about maternal health and childbirth and thinking about how to improve a medicalized system that is, systemically racist. We have a lot of work to do, I will say.
How can we heal the racial divide and improve the birth experiences for Black women in America? I want to welcome a few people who know all too well how dangerous pregnancy can be for Black and brown women. Joining me now are Congresswoman Lauren Underwood, Charles Johnson, Sasha Fuller, and Latham Thomas, here to tell their personal stories and share what each is doing to help change this disturbing narrative. Welcome to the show. Congresswoman Underwood, I know you're a nurse by training, but what brought you to this issue? When did you start focusing on Black maternal health?
One of my good friends and classmates from my graduate program at Johns Hopkins, her name was Dr. Shalon Irving, and she was so excited to be having her first daughter in early 2017, but unfortunately she died 3 weeks after delivery, and it was just shocking to me. She died of complications related to high blood pressure. And that story is far too common. In the video, it mentioned that Black women were 3 to 4 times more likely to die from a pregnancy-related complication than white women. But the other statistic is that for every death, there are 70 near misses. So that speaks to a widespread rate of severe morbidity. And it just lets us know that we have a lot more work to do.
Charles Johnson, I want to bring you in here. What brings you to this conversation?
I am here today out of a deeply painful experience. My wife, Kira, lost her life tragically during the birth of our second son, Langston.
My precious daughter walks into the hospital and she never walks out.
So when we talk about Kira, we're talking about a woman that was exceptionally healthy, who did everything right. And we went into Cedars-Sinai Hospital for what was supposed to be a routine scheduled C-section. And Kira was allowed to bleed internally for more than 10 hours while myself and my family begged and pleaded the staff to take action. We were ignored, we were talked down to, we were given a runaround. And by the time they finally made the decision to take Kira back to surgery, it was far too late. And unfortunately, when this happened to me, I was under the impression that what happened to Kira was an anomaly, that women don't die from giving childbirth in 2016, not in America, right? With all that we have at our disposal. We're in the midst of a maternal mortality crisis in our country that is shameful, not just domestically, but on a global scale as well.
Charles, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sorry to hear about Kira. Talk to me about the folks who were supposed to be taking good care of her. I can't imagine what you went through in general and during those 10 hours, but what did they say on the other side of that?
Very unfortunately, there was a lot of victim blaming. They tried to assume that maybe Kira had some sort of heart issue that had gone undetected, which through the medical investigation, we discovered that was not the case. Kira was failed by the system at the hospital, their procedures and protocols, they threw out the window. And then more than anything, Carlos, there was just a lack of compassion.
I appreciate, admire, and wish you didn't have to be as composed as you are, because I can't imagine the feelings that must move through you and through others. And to think that you will have to figure out a way to make a way out of no way, as my grandmother used to say. Good thoughts to you. Latham Thomas, thank you for joining us as well. I really appreciate you being a part of this important conversation.
My entry point here is as a birth worker. I founded an organization called Mama Glow. And the work that we do is supporting birthing people along the childbearing continuum, from fertility through postpartum. And at any entry point along the reproductive journey where people have to interface with institutions, there's always going to be a point where we have to address respectful maternity care. The model that we currently have in the States really supports normalizing gaslighting, dismissiveness, violence, and dominance in tone and language. It's a normalization of racist and discriminatory language, power over stance, neglect, lack of consent. And so the work that we're doing with our doulas is really to inform them to be empowered, to be incredible advocates alongside their birthing clients.
What you're saying is so powerful to me. You're really calling for a reimagination of some of the things that we've gotten so used to, whether it's hospitals or insurance providers or what have you. And you're really asking us to kind of think from the ground up, what would we do if we were trying to take the best care of ourselves in one of the wealthiest countries? I appreciate you raising that and raising that consciousness here. Sasha Fuller, it's nice to see you. I'm used to seeing you in a different way because for those who don't know, you're the co-executive producer of this show. And so you're usually on the other side of it. What put you on this side of the camera this time?
When we decided to, do a program and focus on, the healthcare system and to talk about birthing while Black and that experience, it made me think of my own. My son is 10 years old. So 10 and a half years ago, someone shared a documentary with me by Ricky Lake, The Business of Being Born. And I thank God that I watched that program. I learned about midwives. I learned about doulas. I learned that a birth can be a beautiful thing and not a horrific thing, and that a woman can be in charge of her birth plan. When I had mentioned these things to my family, they had no idea what these things were. My husband thought, oh my God, are we gonna have the baby in the house, in a barn? Is the baby gonna be born in a hospital? My first go round, the first midwife I worked with, she was Caucasian, and her tone with me, and Charles, you brought up compassion. There was something lacking there. So I knew that when I was going to have another baby, I searched and I found a midwife who looked like me. And when I tell you that experience was so beautiful, and the way she cared for me and the way she just represented me in the hospital.
You got this. You are strong. You can do anything.
She spoke for me. She prayed for me. And I felt like more women need that.
Congresswoman Underwood, what would be the boldest, most important change that a Biden administration and this Congress could make?
You want to make a change in maternal mortality, you have to address Medicaid. Our legislation, the Mommy-Bus, one provision is named after Charles's wife, Kira. Now, within the Mommy-Bus, we center Black women, women of color, and want to make sure that every birthing person in this country has a choice. It shouldn't matter whether you're in an urban community or a rural community. You should be able to choose between a physician and a midwife and a doula and a lactation consultant. You should be able to choose between a birthing center or at home or at a hospital. Birthing people should have choices.
Charles, I want to ask you about healing, because for most of us, it's hard to comprehend going through something like you did and then still coming out on the other side and being as positive and as constructive as you clearly are.
You know, the beautiful thing about love is it has the ability to turn pain into power. There's so many things about what happened on April 12th that I wish I could change. There's so many things about the way my life has turned out and the way my life has turned out for my sons that I wish were different. But those things are beyond my control. What I can control is doing everything I can whenever I have an opportunity to make sure that we send other mothers home with their precious babies. And so it's just so much bigger than just my story. I mean, we're talking about the Amber Rose Isaacs, and we're talking about the Shaija Washingtons, and we're talking about the Yolanda Clemes. I can go on and on and on and talk about and literally call the names of all 800 women that we are losing every single year. And the good news is that we can fix this, and that there are people who are working tremendously hard every single day with you in mind to make our country a better, safer place for mothers and babies.
You know, Charles, part of the power, I know you know this, but just to say this out loud, is there people you don't even know who are taking strength in seeing you be as positive and constructive as you are, and they'll never even get to tell you, but I know that they are. So thank you for being that example, and thank you all for being on the show today. Very grateful to each of you. I hope that in sharing their stories, I hope it's helped each of you and perhaps someone you love. As we continue our conversation on something that has become a birthing epidemic, we now turn to some of our nation's leaders. The crisis demands such urgent attention that some of our legislators are stepping up and taking action. I'm pleased to introduce two very special guests who are leading that effort. Jennifer Carroll Foy, who is running for governor of Virginia, and Senator Cory Booker from New Jersey. Welcome to both of you. Senator Booker, welcome back to the show. It's nice to see you again.
It's great to be back on. Thanks for giving a platform to voices that need to be heard in this conversation especially, and for making this a subject of a dialogue. I really appreciate you, man.
Talk to me about how that issue became something that you were focused on. What brought it to your attention?
I think it's a shameful reality that America is the richest nation on the planet Earth, but overall has one of the highest rates of maternal mortality of the richest nations in the world. And this is a crisis that has only been made worse by this pandemic. And I just made it a mission that has a number of different bills to do a full court press of ending this nightmare in America.
Delegate Foy, I want to welcome you to the conversation. I know that you've been working on this from a policy perspective, but do I understand you also have a personal experience?
I can tell you that when I was running for delegate, I was pregnant with identical twins. And so right before my primary election, I was at work and I felt something that was strange. So I went to see my doctor during my lunch break. I saw his smile turn to concern, turn to panic. And he looked at me and he said, "Your feet will never hit the ground until these babies are born." Right after that, I was put on hospital bed rest. I, had more pain after birth than during labor. And I kept telling the nurses this, and they sent me home anyway. So I was ignored and my complaints were dismissed, and they just kept pumping me full of prescriptions until I got home and one day fell to my knees because the pain was so egregious. And my husband put me in the car, rushed me to the emergency room, where I was immediately admitted and informed that if I would have stayed home a little while longer, I would have definitely lost my life.
Why do you think your concerns were ignored?
Well, the statistics and the studies are clear. Black women, we are not seen, we are not heard, and we are not believed. And it's costing Black and brown women our lives and our children's lives. And so that's exactly why, and one of the reasons that I'm running for governor, because it's not enough to have bills and budgets written for Black women. We need bills and budgets written by Black women, because we bring our personal experiences to bear when we are in these positions.
Are there other countries that have done innovative things in the last decade that we should learn from?
When it comes to the issues of universal pre-K, when it comes to infant mortality rates, as well as maternal mortality rates, America is way behind the pack of high-achieving countries in fostering environments, from paid family leave all the way to access to quality healthcare. And we've got to address those issues. The final thing I'll say is, this is not a Black woman's issue. This is an American issue, and a shame we should step up and deal with, overcoming the poverty of empathy and being truly what we should aspire to be as a beloved community. Thank you so much, Carlos.
Senator Booker, thank you for joining us. Delegate Foy, I so appreciate your clarity, your strength, your confidence. You seem comfortable in yourself. Where does that come from?
It comes from my grandmother who raised me, who taught me that if I have it, I have to give it.
Delegate Foy, I'm keeping my eye on you. You've got all kinds of Fannie Lou Hamer, Shirley Chisholm running through you, and I appreciate you being so open and you sharing in that good way. And I wish you well on what I know will be a good and interesting and important campaign.
Thank you for having me.